Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Dish with Devani, brought to you by Heart Centered Social. I have a juicy topic in store for us today. Well, I think I say that every time because they just keep getting juicier and juicier, and I'm finding some incredible experts. And today is a topic that I wanted to talk about because it's around an experience that I've gone through personally, especially this last year, where I learned so much about myself in a quick period of time. I think all of us, I could say for record that 2017 has been the year of a lot of shifts and awarenesses coming up and just a lot of crazy stuff in the energy. And for me, one of those things was realizing and figuring out that I am empathic. Okay. And if you're not sure what empathic is, or being a highly sensitive person, we're going to dive all into that today. And we're going to dive into that with my good friend Amber here. And Amber Rochelle is an amazing soul sister. We met several years ago in Seattle. I had started a book club, and she saw that I started that and marketed that through Gabby Bernstein's community. Then we met in person at a Marianne Williamson event, and she's been doing some awesome stuff. She went through one of my courses 2 years ago, and so we've just been staying connected, and I've been watching her. And it's funny because she always says I'm a coach for sensitives. And I never really knew what that meant until this year. And I'm like, oh, okay. That's what you mean by that. So I am so it's just amazing how this has come full circle, and to have her now on the show to be able to have us dive really deep into this topic. So to give you guys a little bit of a backstory of Amber Rochelle, she is an intuitive life coach and an expert on sensitivity. She's devoted to helping highly sensitive women to thrive in an often insensitive world. And she works with women who struggle with constant anxiety. They've been told their whole lives that they're too sensitive or too emotional, helping them to manage their sensitivity so they can feel safe in a world and finally feel confident in who they are, and known as the sensitive badass, which I love that. And we're talking today particularly on being empathic and being an entrepreneur, because being an entrepreneur already takes so much out of you. And also, if you are working closely with clients, I know in my community, I have a ton of coaches. It's so important to be aware of if you are empathic or have a little bit of empathicness, and this can come in many different forms, which we'll talk more about that. And then also how to manage that, how to manage your emotions and guard your energy and all that kind of stuff. So welcome, Amber. I am so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me on. I know I love that, our story has kind of come full circle, like you said, and it's just so great to be doing this with you today. So I'm super happy to be here.
Yes. So tell me a little bit about your journey, what got you to step into being an intuitive coach for sensitive women, sensitive badasses.
Yeah. So, my history is my career history is actually in advertising. For a long time, I worked as a graphic designer in the advertising industry in Seattle. And, it was fine. I don't regret that. I got a lot out of it. But I started to realize that I was getting very, very burnt out. It's a really tough environment to be in, especially as a sensitive. And B, my heart just wasn't in it. I had always felt like I wanted to do something that was giving back, something that was adding meaning to the world. And I just wasn't finding that there for myself personally. And so I started looking into going back to school to become a therapist. And my concern there was kind of because I am such an empath, I was oh my God, I'm going to be handing out my phone number to all my clients and having them sleeping on my couch. And this is going to be bad. This obviously was a little earlier on in my journey before I was learning to set strong boundaries. But I discovered randomly a life coach online, and I was oh my God, this is a thing that people do and make money at. So I became obsessed with it, started researching it, found a training program in Seattle, which was amazing, went through that, and it just kind of took off from there. And I feel like I found the thing that I absolutely 100% believe that I'm supposed to be doing. And in the beginning, I wasn't focusing specifically on working with highly sensitive women. It dawned on me as I was sort of going through my own journey with, kind of coming to terms with my sensitivity and realizing that I had to put my foot down and start changing the way that I was living my life if I wanted to be able to thrive, especially as an entrepreneur, because that brings up such a set of unique challenges. And so as I was kind of learning to set my own boundaries and really get a very, supportive self-care routine for myself, I just clicked and I was like, everything I'm teaching about really is falling through the lens of being sensitive. And there's so many women out there that really, really need tools and solutions and support around this because it's just not talked about that much. And a lot of us feel really misunderstood and alone. And so the second I stepped into that, it was just like everything was so aligned. And, I really haven't looked back. It's been really amazing coaching women around this and, just seeing more and more the need for it.
Yeah, that's so great. What a great story. Thank you. So tell us, what are the ways, so if somebody's just at the beginning thinking, well, I consider myself somewhat sensitive, but what are the different types of sensitivities that you can have and how do they show up?
Yeah, this is a really good question. So people have different opinions on this. This is just mine. It's take what works for you and leave the rest. I was very inspired by Elaine Aron, who is a psychologist that did a bunch of research in the early 90s, and she is the one that coined the term the highly sensitive person. So what she discovered is that roughly 20% of the population has this genetic trait. And it's we process sensory data differently. So basically, we take in more information about the world around us, and how that kind of shows up or plays out in your life is that you can feel extra overwhelmed easily. It takes you longer to make decisions. You're startled more easily. You need more downtime, and you take on the emotions of others. So that is, there's a lot more to it than that, but that's kind of the gist of it. So that's the highly sensitive genetic trait. And then I know we hear the term empath a lot as well, right? So here's what I find to be true is that if you are a highly sensitive person, if you have that genetic trait, you are by nature an empath because you have the ability to tap into the feelings of other people. You don't have to have all of the other highly sensitive genetic stuff to be empathetic and to be able to be an empath. So this is just what I've found to be true is that if you have that genetic trait, you actually, and it's interesting if you start to look into the kind of scientific side of it, the brain science behind it, there's more activation in what's called our mirror neurons in our brains if you're highly sensitive. And those are the things that they give you empathy, right? So if you see somebody pick up a cup of coffee and take a sip out of it, right? Your brain fires as if you're doing that yourself. So for people who have this highly sensitive genetic trait, we have more activation in those neurons. So we're naturally more empathetic. I tend to think that the lines are very blurred. Empath is a little bit more of a spiritual term, whereas highly sensitive is a little bit more of a scientific term. But at the end of the day, the biggest thing and the thing that I work on the most with people is the overwhelm, feeling so deeply and picking up on the emotions and energy of other people.
Yeah, definitely. And I've heard that some people can have symptoms where they actually feel physically, if somebody has you're around somebody and they've injured their leg or something, you can take on that. And then there's some where if you're the type of sensitive person where it's just the emotions and the feelings. For me, I don't take on somebody's physical things, but I can feel emotions really deeply of someone else.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I don't take on the physical pains, but definitely the emotions. And what's interesting too is that some people who grow up highly sensitive, I've seen that there's kind of two sides to this. So there's those of us who literally cannot turn it off. I am one of those. Yeah. And there's some people who at a very young age somehow find the capability to turn it off. Now that is not a good thing. What I like to teach is a way to manage it and work with it and know how to make it work for you and not against you. But when you're turning it off, you're also turning off your connection to yourself. You're turning off your connection to your truth. And so a lot of people will say, well, I'm not, they'll realize all of a sudden wow, I never knew I was sensitive, but it's because they were shutting down and compartmentalizing that part of themselves, right? So it can go either way.
Yeah. And for me, like I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know how to deal with it. So I shut it down in numerous ways. One way was my parents put me on an antidepressant when I was 14 because they didn't know what was going on and I was super depressed, and I had moved from the city to the country. Totally new atmosphere, trying to make friends. I'm this like young teenager trying to find myself, and it was the most horrific emotional experience. And then I did for a number of years of like alcohol and drugs and all these things to like, you know, feel like normal and to not be so sensitive. So, and I know that that's often when I was doing research about highly sensitive people is they are more likely to be alcoholics or be addicts because it's a way that helps us to just like put that numbing layer on there.
Yes, 100%. It's very, very common. And if it's not alcohol, it's food. And if it's not food, it's workaholism. It's just something that is, you know, like you said, numbing it out. It's like putting a blanket over yourself. Like I think somebody just commented, like shutting off the noise, because the world can feel so loud and so overwhelming. And it almost feels, when you are an untrained empath, like everybody's emotions are just like coming at you. Like you can feel like a victim. And when you know, grow up, and it's not always, I want to preface this by saying, you know, a lot of times parents don't understand, and it's not because they're not good parents. It's not their fault. It's just, this is not, it's becoming much more widely talked about these days, which I love, but in the past it really wasn't. And so a lot of parents have children that are highly sensitive and they just don't know what to do with them. Right. And so for a child who grows up in that environment, you know, no fault of their parents, but it can be very damaging to them because they start to feel like something is deeply wrong with them, that they're inherently flawed because the world around them, and especially the people that are most important to them, are reflecting back to them that somehow their experience of the world is incorrect. Right. You hear, you're too dramatic, you're too sensitive. Why are you overreacting? Why are you crying so much? And in your child brain, what that ends up telling you is that you can't trust your own feelings. You can't trust your own sense of the world. And so for a lot of people, these negative coping mechanisms, the drugs and the alcohol and whatnot, is serving two purposes. And one is to numb out, and another is because deep down inside they feel empty and they feel not good enough and they feel like nobody gets them, right? And that was my experience growing up. And for me, I did do a lot of drinking, but I also ended up with a very serious eating disorder, and that's how it manifested for me. And because I felt like I had to work so hard to prove myself to make up for this like imaginary flaw that I always felt that I had, that was my perfectionism just sort of snowballed into that. And I think a lot of people feel that way too, that you have to prove yourself, that you have to work harder to be loved, that you have to work harder to fit in. All of these sorts of limiting beliefs and old stories that we grow up carrying around with us into adulthood, right?
Yeah. And thank you for sharing that. I'm loving the comments that are coming in of just women relating. Susan, I'd cry and smoke cigarettes and binge and purge. And Michelle can totally relate, and also has a little girl that she's noticing is highly sensitive, which can be really hard. So thank you all for being here and for sharing. So let's talk about what have you learned through your journey and through your career. Like, how can we start now to create some tools and put tools in our tool belt to deal and manage with this, to not have to numb ourselves out, to be able to heal and to fully thrive as being highly sensitive?
Yeah, so there's so much to go into here. So one of the most important things is that you really have to accept, first of all, that this is how you are different. It's not going to change. The more you fight it, the more it's going to come up in a way that's going to appear negative to you. The more you're going to feel reactive, the more people are going to label you as reactive. The more that you fight it, the harder it's going to be for you. When you really start to accept it and embrace it, and you can be mad about it. I mean, here's the thing is, we do have different needs than the other 80% of the population. We do need more downtime. We do need more rest. We do need more process time. And that can be frustrating, particularly when you're an entrepreneur and you're juggling all of the plates, right? And it's like, I don't have time to sit down and meditate. But it's crucial. This creating time, creating downtime, creating space, creating real connection with yourself is absolutely 100% crucial. And you can be pissed off about it. It can be frustrating that you need to take this time out. But once you start to do this in a regular way and have a regular practice, once you will start to see how much better you feel, and then you'll want to do it more. And I have struggled with this so hard, which is funny because I teach this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I will
always
be like,
teach what we need to learn, right?
Yeah, I'm like, I know better. Why am I not doing my routine? But what I have found over my years of studying sensitivity and working on my own and working with so many other women is that what we need most is to really be kind to ourselves and compassionate with ourselves about our true nature, to recognize our limits, to be able to trust our limits, and to tend to our own needs. So part of the problem is that, like I was mentioning earlier, we often are workaholics as well because we're trying to work so hard and prove ourselves, but we're also chronic people pleasers because when you're tapped into the emotions of everybody around you, it's natural to want to help, to want to fix, to want to heal. And that in and of itself is not a bad thing. It's a beautiful thing. But what happens a lot of the time is if we haven't done the inner work on our own self-worth, we will always put ourselves last. And when you're an entrepreneur, and especially if you're just starting out, you really have a lot on your plate and you will burn yourself out so very, very, very fast. And you have to realize that if you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to be that good for anybody anyways, right? When you're exhausted and overwhelmed and just overworked and resentful, how are you going to be able to serve from that place? And so if your intention is, whether you're a service-based entrepreneur or not, but if your intention is to be doing good work in the world, you really have to put yourself first. And so what I mean by this is creating a very solid, consistent self-care routine. And that can look different for everybody, right? For me, it fluctuates, and that's fine. Sometimes it's however you feel in the day. The important thing is that you're carving out quiet time, space, and connection with yourself. So I like to think of our relationship with ourselves like a relationship with anybody else, right? So you put time and effort into your relationship with your partner or your best friend or your mom, but we don't often think about that the same way when it comes to ourselves, but we need to, and we should, especially when you're highly sensitive, because the world is so noisy and because we're kind of picking up on all of these voices and emotions and all these things around us, it can be extra hard to hear the voice of our own inner guide. And so it's really, really necessary for us to cultivate that connection with ourselves and to have time in silence so that we start to be able to hear that voice. Because the voice of your ego is loud enough already, right? We all have our inner critic that's always like nipping at us, right? And then we've got noise from the world around us. So you really need to start to get to know that inner voice so that she can get a little bit louder and you can start to recognize her more throughout kind of all of the gunk that's coming at you. So that's really important. And also, I like to think of it too as it might not, you might do for me, it's a morning routine. And what I do during that time is different. I usually stretch. It's really important for me to ground down into my body. Sometimes I'll pull cards, sometimes I'll meditate, sometimes I'll journal, sometimes I'll just kind of sit with my headphones on. But it's all about like connecting in and, grounding down. And sometimes that day I'll be like, well, that didn't do any good. I still feel crazy anxious. But the point is not like that day. The point is the long term, because you're building up this store of like calm and centeredness and connectedness to yourself. And you take that and carry that out into your day. Mm-hmm. So you might not feel it the first time you do it. You might not feel it the first week you do it, but a month into it, you're going to start to realize that you now have the centeredness that you never had before.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, it's made a world of difference for me of creating that space of the first hour is all about me versus jumping right into work. And in those days where sometimes once in a while I have to, because there's some fire I need to put out or there's an emergency or something like that, my energy is totally different on those days. And so we do bank up each time we give ourselves more and more of this time for us to center and ground ourselves. It makes the world of difference. And my routine is somewhat similar to yours, where I love journaling. The meditation is an absolute for me. And if I have a lot of stuff that's going on in my brain, doing a guided meditation is easier because sometimes it's just really hard as an empath to shut those thoughts off and to find that silence. And so grounded, guided meditations, and then also the journaling, pulling cards. Sometimes I'll burn a little sage. I'll do some essential oils, and then moving my body, whether it's stretching, doing yoga, or going to a workout class. And even though I'm not starting my day a little bit later because I'm making time for this, my day is more productive because I'm making time for this. So for the longest time, I was like, I got to work, 24/7 and pushing myself through. And that's when I experienced a burnout in my business versus listening to myself. And now I put myself first because it allows me to be able to do more in my business. So it's counterintuitive thinking of always being in that hustle mode.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of people get stuck in that. And like I said, myself included, I still have days where I slip back and I wake up and I'm like, oh my God, I have so much to do today. And then I'll jump right in. And then all of a sudden it's lunch. And I'm like, oh, I didn't, and this is why I do. I mean, everybody's a little bit different, but if you can do it in the morning, that is the best. Because usually if you don't do it in the morning, the day is going to get away from you and it's not going to get done. And I love that you mentioned using sage and essential oils, because what's really extra cool about those is that your brain will get used to a scent and it will associate that scent with the feeling that you're cultivating in your practice. So it can be, I often recommend to clients to carry around a little spritzer bottle of like an essential oil mixed with some water, because if you're stressed out during your day, say you're working in an office, or you're in between clients and you don't have time to go sit down and center, just sometimes smelling that scent, just spraying it on yourself can re-trigger that sense of calm that you have in your morning practice. So that's a really cool little tip to use as well. And moving your body. Yes. So I like to stretch in the morning, but I also have a really consistent workout routine. So this is a big one, guys, because it does three things it does a lot of things for us, but as far as being an empath, it's a huge stress reliever. I mean, it's literally my antidepressant. Like, cardio is the best ever. It also helps you to move energy through your body. And when you're picking up everybody's energy all day long, it's going to help you to release some of that. And it can be really grounding as well. You have a good exercise, you get your endorphins up, and then you sit down and stretch and just be with yourself and really connect in. So it's a very, very, very good thing, whether it's yoga, whether it's cardio. Again, what that looks like can be individual to you, but the important part is that like connection with your body and getting your endorphins up.
Yeah, love that. So let's dive into the truth about what we think will make us successful, and the power of bracing our emotions and vulnerability in our business.
Yes, I love talking about this. So it's a little in line with some of the stuff that we were talking about already of, the hustle, right? And you think that you need to always be working harder and pushing harder and putting in more time. And for those of us that are still carrying around that, not enough wound, and let me back that up for a minute. That is something that is pretty universal. A lot of people struggle with this sense of not enoughness. The difference is where you're at with it, right? Have you started to dig into it? Have you started to look at it? Have you started to kind of tend to and care for that wound that you have, right? Or, I've been working on the worthiness and the not enoughness for years. It still comes up, but when it comes up, I'm now able to recognize it. I know what it is and I know what to do about it to move through it. So I'm not saying none of this work that we do is ever going to be like one and done and tied up in a pretty little bow, right? It's a lifelong journey. So just a little side note there. But if we're still in that place of feeling like we're not enough and we have something to prove, we have to prove ourselves to the world, that can really perpetuate what is already kind of pushed in American society of this go, multitasking, always doing all of these things. You're supposed to be wonderful at this and have these beautiful kids and have this business and all of these things. It's a lot of pressure and it's a lot of noise and it's a lot of go. And those things are not good for sensitive people. And so we can get really caught up in that when you're starting a business, or even if you're not just starting, but you're really trying. It's hard to be a business owner. It's awesome, but it's really challenging. And so I think there's a lot of pressure because you don't have that consistent paycheck to count on, especially in the beginning. So it's easy to get caught up in that pressure and feel like the only way that you're going to be able to make it is to push and push and push. But the truth is that you really need that downtime. You really need that connection time with yourself, like we talked about earlier. And also, I think a lot of people feel like you need to be and yes, okay, you need to be professional in your business, but professional does not mean non-emotional. And there can be a real disconnect there where sometimes we feel like we can't show any emotions, we can't show any vulnerability, or people will think that we can't help them, right? But the opposite is true. The opposite is true. People want to know that you understand them. People want to know that you get them. People want to know that you've been through stuff, that you've grown, that you'll be able to, have compassion for them and have empathy for them because you understand the feelings that they're feeling, right? So the truth is that, especially if you're a service-based entrepreneur, as an empath or sensitive, I think you actually have an edge because not only can you tap into what your clients are feeling, but you are able to hold this really powerful space for them. And when you open up to them and you talk about your truth and you stand up and say, I can be strong and I can cry at the same time. Crying and being emotional and being vulnerable does not equal weakness. Like, I'm so sick of that myth, right? I actually think it makes you much stronger. I think it takes much more strength to stand in your vulnerability and to be able to ask for help, to be able to say that you're struggling with something, to be able to talk about your truth, than it does to, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and be Mr. Tough Guy, right? So the more that you can be you, the more people are going to feel connected to you, the more they're going to relate to you, and then the more they're going to buy from you.
Yes, I love that. That is so true. And, we're seeing, and I feel like for me, I am cutting through a lot of the bullshit that you see on social media. And I think a lot of people are waking up, and it's like we have this meter of who is just talking to talk and try to get a sale or whatever. And then the other meter of who's being authentic and who's being really vulnerable in their message. And it's not about sharing all of your messes. And you definitely, for me, I like to share things after I've gone through the other side and I've been able to learn a lesson. But there's also about sharing as you're going through something in an empowering way and being vulnerable about it to be real. And I try to practice that as much as I can. And I still have those little voices that come up. It's like, should you be sharing this? This is a little personal. But then again, I feel like it builds so much trust and people get to really know me and see my authentic side and really understand who I am as a person. And that builds trust in them wanting to follow me as a coach and a leader.
Absolutely. And what it also does is it gives other people permission to do the same thing. So, the more that we stand in our own truth and the more that we talk about our feelings, the more that people are like, oh, she's doing it. Maybe it's okay for me to do this too, right? And being a sensitive person, I think that's so, so important because there's so many of us out there that don't feel safe talking about our feelings, that have been ostracized for them, right? So to see powerful women saying yeah, I'm emotional and I own that, and I love that about myself. That is so empowering to other people who might still be in that space of feeling like it's not okay for them to talk about their feelings. Yeah. So it really is doing two things there, and people are going to be inspired by that. And that's then you're really, it's going so much beyond yourself, right? You're attracting people to you, they're feeling that they can trust you, but you're also inspiring them to change, which then inspires other people to change. So it's a really, really important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So tell us a little bit on what are some practical tips that we can use to take on the emotions and the negative energy of others in business?
Yes. So this is such a big one because you will get drained really fast if you are constantly absorbing all of the emotions. And for me, it's I'm a coach, right? So a lot of times when I'm talking to people, we go really, really deep and it can be really emotional and I get very invested and it can be hard not to walk away from that session feeling like I'm walking away carrying the heaviness that that person might have been working through, right? So things that I found that are extremely helpful for me and that are extremely helpful for a lot of my clients are, again, this is a consistent practice. So this is the type of stuff that you really need to keep up to see a really big result from. But one of my favorite tips is, I call it taking your emotional pulse. And so basically all that this means is I have people set an alarm on their phone for 3 or 4 times a day. It's to remind you to stop, right? Because even if you have a beautiful, amazing morning routine, you might go through that and you're all relaxed and you're all zen out, and then you sit down at your desk and you're like, oh my God, and then you just like dive into all of your things, right? And it's like boom, 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 boom. And then in the evening, you're like, what just happened the last 7 hours? And you're stressed and you're anxious and you're exhausted. And so I like for people to just take like 5 minutes, even 2, I don't care, like even 2, like I prefer 5, but where you walk away from your desk, you walk away from your things, like just like put your hand on your heart. What I like, connect with yourself for a second. Stop. Like stopping is the biggest thing. Like stop what you're doing, hands down, right? Yeah. And like just take a couple deep breaths and check in with yourself and be like, where am I at? What am I feeling? How am I doing? What do I need right now? And what this does is it helps you to, kind of break up the day so that you're not, because a lot of times what happens is, and again, even if we have a morning practice, the morning practice will help immensely. But sometimes even with that, at the end of the day, we've been picking stuff up throughout the day and not noticing it because we're busy or we're very connected with our clients, right? So we're not focused on ourselves, we're focused on them. And then in the evening, you're like, God, I feel really anxious. Why do I feel so anxious? And sometimes at that point, it's such a tangled mess of emotions that it's a little bit too hard to be able to pick through there and figure out what's yours and what's not yours. So this emotional check-in is really going to help you to start noticing when you're picking stuff up throughout the day so that you can address it in the moment. And also you are really strengthening this muscle of being able to be aware of when that's happening so that it's not something that you notice later when the stress and the anxiety comes on, but that as you go throughout your day, you'll be like, oh, okay, I'm feeling like I'm picking up this person's stuff. Maybe I need to take a quick walk around the block or something. So it really helps you to start to, hone in on that skill of checking in with yourself and knowing when stuff is coming up. So that's a big one. So that and breaks throughout the day. Don't eat at your desk. Like sit down and have lunch, even if it's just 15, 20 minutes. Give yourself that space. All of these little things like breaking up your day is going to help you to know when stuff is coming up for you, right? Another thing that I really love is I have a thing called a worry journal. So it's just a notebook that is literally dedicated to just like word vomit. So sometimes I'll do this on my lunch break. Sometimes I'll do it during my morning practice. All the things you're stressed about, all the things you're worried about, all the things that are pissing you off, like give yourself a dedicated space to just write that down. I hate this, I'm worried about this, I'm stressed about this. It's a container for that stuff so that you're letting yourself like acknowledge it. These are the things that are scaring me, stressing me out, pissing me off, whatever. And now I'm going to put those aside and I'm going to trust that like God's got me and I'm going to go into my day. And it's there's that. And there's also a God. Have you ever used a God box?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's another one that's really helpful where you write down something that you feel like is way too big for you to be able to deal with. And you put it in this box. I have one on my altar. And so it's like you're giving it up to God or your higher power, angels, universe, unicorns, whatever resonates with you, right? But that like something outside of yourself has that for you, is holding that for you. We get so weighed down as empaths and sensitives with things that anything that helps us to feel like something is lifted off of us is going to make us more resilient throughout our day. And ritual is really, really powerful for us. We really resonate well with rituals. So things like altars and the aromatherapy that you were mentioning and card pulling and meditation and, the God box and all of those types of things are really good for our souls as empaths. What else did I have little notes here? Because I was like, there's so many things. Oh, another thing that's really, really important is just to make sure that in general that you're getting enough sleep, that you're getting proper nutrition. I mean, I know this sounds so basic and like, oh, whatever, Amber, duh. But that stuff slips when we're busy. It's, a microwave meal at my desk while I'm working, or I don't have time to work out today, or I have to work really late tonight because I have a deadline. And yes, sometimes those things will come up, but just be aware if that starts to become a pattern. Because again, we have a greater need for, stability. And so the things that are going to give you stability are this consistent self-care routine and making sure that you have proper nutrition, that you are, because anything can set us off a little bit easier. So if you only got 5 hours of sleep, or if you haven't eaten that much that day, all of that can kick you into that place of being more reactive, which is what a lot of people will complain about as sensitives. Like, I feel like I'm so reactive, feelings come up and I don't know what to do with them. So you really want to build a very strong foundation for yourself with this self-care and with just, basic life stuff, right? And all of those things are going to help you to grow stronger roots. Like, I use this metaphor of a tree where, if you have a tree that has really it's old, it's rotting, like its roots are rotting, and a storm comes in, like that thing is going to get whipped around and probably fall over. But if there's a tree that's super strong and has really deep roots, like it's not going to be as damaged by the storm. So it's the same thing, is that you really just want to keep building this foundation. And then the final thing that's really, really important is for you to check in with what you are telling yourself, right? So are you telling yourself that you pick up everybody's stuff and there's nothing you can do about it, right? You might not know right in that moment what the right skill is to deal with that, but notice the inner dialogue that's going on. Start doing some journaling around, what was I told about feelings when I was younger? Why do I believe the things that I believe? Because all of those things, like our thoughts inform our beliefs, and that informs our behaviors, and that informs our reality, right? So the more that you can, and this is the work that I really dig deep into with my clients, is about going back and seeing like what you were taught and the beliefs that you brought into adulthood about yourself and about what's okay, about your own worthiness, about taking care of yourself. All of these things, well, they might not sound immediately related to you picking up other people's emotions. They completely and totally are. And so there's a lot of work to be done around that stuff there as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, those are so good. So question, let's say you take on someone's energy and you are aware that you've taken on someone's energy. What do you do then to release that energy?
Yes, amazing question. So there's a couple different things you can do. And again, try these. Some will work better for other people and some will work better for, it's really just, I like to give people a huge tool belt, like you were saying before, so that you can pick and choose, right? There's not just one way to do this. Something that people find really, really helpful is journaling, because when you're having a conversation with yourself, when you're getting it outside of your head and onto paper, it can help you to be like, oh, that's where I picked this up from. Okay, this is not mine, right? Sometimes when we're in that place of not knowing where it came from, just journaling can be a really great way to decipher where you might have picked that up throughout your day. What's really helpful for some people is to use an affirmation, or for me, it's a prayer of just like, God, universe, spirit, like, I know I picked up this thing from so-and-so, like, please take this energy and transmute it into love and into safety and health for this person. Like, you can almost like send it back to them in a really loving way. It's just a really beautiful visualization to see yourself taking that negative energy and turning it into loving energy and handing it back to them, right? So that can be really helpful as well. You can also go work out. Sometimes you just need to literally move it through your body, right? Or go for a walk, grounding down. So if you're in an area where, the weather's nice enough to go outside, take your shoes off, put your feet in the grass, and literally visualize that energy going down through your feet and into the core of the earth, and again, getting recycled, right? So, but acknowledge it and say like, I picked this up. I know I picked this up. This doesn't feel good, and know that you need to do something about it. Don't try and just push through. Because the more that you try and just push through, whether it's with other people's energy or your own feelings, that stuff gets stuck and stored in your body. And later on, that's going to manifest as anxiety or sometimes physical illness. So you always want to acknowledge and care for whatever is going on. I mean, you don't have to make a big deal out of it. I mean, like 5 minutes, go outside, put your feet on the ground and close your eyes and like visual, it doesn't always have to be like this hour long. Like people are like, I don't have time for all of this. And I'm like, you have 5 minutes.
Yeah, definitely.
You're around all day, like that's gonna talk about ruining your productivity.
Yes. Kathy posted a question. She says, what if your close family members that live with you are extremely negative? I can only change my reaction, not them.
That's
a tough one.
It is a tough one. It really is. So a few things, Kathy. I grew up in a household that was very negative, so I relate to this. So I understand what you're going through. It's really hard. Not everybody's always in a situation where they can get out of that, you might not be able to move immediately, or who knows what's going on there. But point being, okay, so you're stuck in this situation where people are being negative around you. So the more that you can find ways to get out of the house, right? Maybe your self-care practice is done outside, or is done, somewhere, like maybe you need to find like a consistent yoga class or a group meditation class where you can go be in more positive, more calming energy. So any type of stuff that you can do for yourself outside of the house. Also, if you can carve out a space for yourself, if you have the ability to do this, inside your house that's just yours. Right? If you love plants, like fill it up with all the things that you love, all the things that make you happy, the things that make you feel grounded and centered. Again, try the aromatherapy. You can get a little diffuser, like make yourself a Zen den in your own house so that when the people around you are being negative, you're like, I'm going to my Zen den and I'm going to clear myself of this stuff. So if you have the ability in your home to do that, I would really recommend that. And also, there's nothing wrong with, and this can be tricky, so depending on what the relationship is with these people in your home, but there's nothing wrong with trying to address that situation head on. I think it's really important for us as sensitives to stand up for ourselves, and people don't always understand how it feels to be us. So they might not even realize that they're being negative, and they might not realize how that negativity is affecting you. So you might have done this already, but if you haven't, I encourage you to tell them. And obviously that's a hard conversation to have. You don't want to go to somebody and be like, you're so negative and it's bumming me out, right? But you can be like, hey, listen, like I want to talk to you about my sensitivity, like in an educational way, right? Because people don't always get it. They might not know that loud noises and negativity are affecting you so seriously. So to be able to say, like, I have this thing and I'm just learning how to care for it and talk about it, and I really want to sit down with you and talk about it because I want to make sure that we have a healthy relationship in this house. It's your husband? Yeah, okay. So then that's definitely important. So if it's your husband and he loves you, right? And this is a primary relationship in your life, you can position it up. I want our relationship to get even stronger. Like I want our marriage to be the best that it can possibly be. So this is something that I'm working on for myself and I could really use your help with this, right? Try that and see how he resonates with that. Sometimes I'll tell people, there's a lot of good articles, and Kathy, I'll post a link. I'll post a link below, but sometimes just to send them an article, because sometimes coming out of your mouth, they'll be like, yeah, not saying that's fair, but if they read an article out of like Psychology Today or something, it's like, oh, this is actually a thing, right?
Yeah, like I'm not making this up, I promise, like here.
Yeah. I hope that's helpful, Kathy.
This was all so great. Such great tips. I love it. Where can the viewers find more information about you?
Yes, so my website is just amberrochelle.com, and then I'm at Miss Amber Rochelle, just MS Amber Rochelle on Instagram and on Twitter. I will post links below to that stuff as well. And also I have a free 5-day course, you guys, that is called All the Feels, and it's all about emotional overwhelm. So if that is something that you're really struggling with, this is like an awesome freebie. There's a meditation, there's worksheets, there's all sorts of really good stuff in it. So I'll post the link to that as well. Be sure to sign up and let me know how that works out for you. And I'm so happy that you guys all joined us today. Devani, this was really, really awesome. I'm so grateful that you had me on.
Yeah, this was so much fun. And I just love bringing all of us together and seeing more women pop up in my community that are sensitive beings, because we are all in this together. And I am determined to continuing to thrive, even with my sensitivities. And so I love being able to share this information. And thank you, Amber, for doing what you do and for getting out there and for honing in on this niche, which I think is just so beautiful. I just am so grateful that you were able to be here with us and we're able to pass this along. So, and for all of you that are on live, please share with your friends, and for those watching the replay, thank you. If you have any questions for me or Amber after the show, then just be sure to drop a post and a comment below, and then I'll make sure to update the video information so you have all of the links for Amber and her awesome free course. So thank you, ladies. Sending everyone lots of love. Thank you, Amber, and I'll talk to you guys soon.
Bye.
Bye.